Italy's role in World War II is often overshadowed by its defeats and missteps. The butt of jokes, the punchline to a tragic punchline. But why did the Italian army struggle so much? Was it just bad luck? Or was there more beneath the surface? Were they really as incompetent as history remembers them? Or is this a case of history being written by the victors? Today, we're diving deep into the heart of the Italian war machine, peeling back the layers of time to understand the factors that crippled a nation's martial spirit. Buckle up, because we're about to take a wild ride through the blood-soaked battlefields of history. Italian troops were often sent into battle with weapons that were relics from World War I. These weapons, while once state-of-the-art, had long since been surpassed by more modern technology. Imagine that, going into the most technologically advanced war in human history, a conflict defined by tanks and airplanes, with weapons your father, even your grandfather might have used. The psychological impact of this cannot be overstated. Soldiers knew they were at a disadvantage before they even engaged the enemy. Their rifles, machine guns, and artillery pieces were frequently unreliable and less effective than those of their adversaries. Malfunctions were common, and the soldiers often found themselves in dire situations because their equipment failed them at critical moments. To put it bluntly, they were outgunned before the first shot was even fired. This disadvantage was not just a matter of inferior firepower, but also of morale, as soldiers faced the grim reality of their situation. Italy's tanks, like the Carro Armato M13/40, were under-armored and undergunned compared to Allied tanks. These tanks were often outmatched in both firepower and durability, making them vulnerable on the battlefield. Imagine a boxer stepping into the ring with Mike Tyson, only to find out he's expected to fight with one hand tied behind his back. The odds were overwhelmingly against him, much like the Italian soldiers who faced better-equipped enemies. That was the Italian tank crew's reality. They had to make do with what they had, often improvising and relying on their wits to survive. It wasn't just about individual pieces of equipment either, it was systemic. The entire military infrastructure was outdated, and the logistical support was insufficient to keep up with the demands of modern warfare. The Italian industrial complex lagged behind its counterparts, unable to churn out war material at the pace and quality needed to compete on the global stage. Factories struggled to produce enough equipment, and what they did produce was often subpar, further hampering the war effort. Italy's industrial capacity was severely limited compared to the major powers. The country was simply not equipped to compete on the same level. While nations like Germany and the United States were cranking out tanks and planes like clockwork, their production lines were a marvel of efficiency and scale. Italy struggled to keep pace. Their soldiers often found themselves with outdated equipment that was no match for the enemy's advanced technology. Factories were inefficient, and Italy lacked crucial raw materials like oil, coal, and iron. This scarcity crippled their ability to produce the necessary war machinery. Imagine trying to bake a cake with no flour, no sugar, just a handful of stale breadcrumbs. That's what it was like for Italian industry trying to support a war effort. That was the harsh reality for Italian industry. They were constantly battling against the odds, trying to make do with what little they had. As a result, Italian soldiers often went into battle without enough ammunition, proper clothing, or even food. Their hardships were unimaginable. They say an army marches on its stomach. Well, the Italian army was practically starving. Their rations were meager, and malnutrition was a common issue. This wasn't just a military problem, it was a symptom of deeper economic woes that had plagued Italy for decades. The war only exacerbated these long-standing issues, making victory an even more distant dream. Italian military leadership was plagued by inexperience and arrogance. Mussolini, who fancied himself a great military leader, often overruled his generals, leading to disastrous campaigns. Imagine a ship's captain, drunk on bad wine and delusions of grandeur, steering his vessel straight into a hurricane because he refused to listen to his navigators. That was Mussolini. The invasion of Greece in 1940 is a prime example of this hubris. What was supposed to be a swift victory turned into a humiliating quagmire, exposing the Italian army's weaknesses for the world to see. The Greek campaign was a microcosm of everything wrong with Italy's war effort: poor planning, inadequate equipment, and a fundamental misunderstanding of the enemy. Chapter 4: The Uncomfortable Embrace. Italy's alliance with Nazi Germany was fraught with tension and mistrust. The Germans often viewed the Italian military as inferior, and coordination between the two forces was chaotic. Imagine trying to dance the tango with a partner who keeps stepping on your toes, all while whispering insults in your ear. That was the Italo-German alliance in a nutshell. During the North African campaign, Rommel's Afrika Korps had to constantly compensate for Italy's weaknesses. They were like a skilled surgeon forced to operate with rusty tools and an incompetent assistant. This constant need to prop up their supposed ally bred resentment and ultimately undermined the entire Axis war effort. Chapter 5. A Crisis of Faith. Morale among Italian troops was disastrously low. Many conscripts were poorly trained, lacked motivation, and had little faith in Mussolini's cause. They were fighting a war they didn't believe in, led by officers who often lacked respect and empathy for their men. Imagine being asked to die for a cause you don't understand, led by men who wouldn't even share their rations with you. That was the grim reality for many Italian soldiers. It wasn't just about the lack of food or bullets, it was a deeper existential crisis. The Italian people never truly bought into Mussolini's vision of a new Roman Empire. Chapter 6. The Fall of the House of Savoy. This chapter delves into the dramatic and tumultuous events that led to the downfall of one of Italy's most prominent royal families. By 1943, the Allies invaded Sicily, marking a significant turning point in the war. And Italy's war effort collapsed under the immense pressure of the Allied advance. The Italian people, exhausted by years of war and hardship, turned against Mussolini. Their patience had worn thin, and their desire for change grew stronger. The fascist regime, built on a foundation of lies and bluster, began to show its cracks. It crumbled like a stale biscotti, unable to withstand the weight of its own false promises. The Italian people, who had once cheered Il Duce, now cursed his name. The fascist regime fell, and Italy switched sides, seeking a new path. Fighting against their former German allies, this shift was not just a military maneuver but a profound transformation in the nation's identity. This wasn't just a change of government, it was a complete 180-degree turn in Italy's political landscape. The new government sought to rebuild and redefine Italy's future, distancing itself from the shadows of fascism. The Italian people, having tasted the bitter fruit of war, were done with it. They wanted peace, stability, and a chance to rebuild their lives, even if it meant aligning themselves with the very forces they had been fighting against just months earlier. This was a new beginning for Italy, a chance to forge a new identity and future. Outro echoes of defeat. Italy's struggle in World War II serves as a stark reminder: ambition without preparation leads to disaster. The lessons of history are as relevant today as ever. The Italian story is a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most grandiose ambitions can crumble under the weight of their own contradictions. It's a story of individual courage let down by systemic failures, of missed opportunities and tragic miscalculations. But most importantly, it's a story that reminds us to look beyond the simplistic narratives of victory and defeat, and to grapple with the complex realities that shape our world.